The box in the vault wasn't heavy, but when the banker set it on the table, my hands shook like I was trying to lift a headstone. Number 713. The number my mother used to write on grocery lists by mistake. Like her memory couldn't stop leaking it, even years before she disappeared. The manager stepped back with practiced discretion. "Take your time, Mr. Miles." I slid the thin brass key into the lock, turned once, and the tumblers answered with a small, decisive click. When the lid rose, I expected cash or jewelry, some forgotten inheritance, some benign explanation to soothe a son who'd learned to live with a hole where his mother should have been. Instead, I found a folded letter sealed in blue wax, a plastic evidence bag marked PD 1999, a tiny velvet ring box I knew too well, and a camcorder tape labeled in my mother's careful hand. "If I vanish, play this first." For a full breath, I didn't move. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere outside the vault door, a printer chirred. Someone laughed softly. Time went on for everyone but me. My thumb shook as I broke the wax. The letter smelled like cedar and faint perfume, my mother's habit of tucking sachets in drawers. "Jonathan, if you're reading this, your father has already told you a story about me. It's the wrong one. Do not show him this letter. Do not trust anyone who does business with him. The truth is inside the tape and the bag. Get a lawyer before you go home. I am sorry. I love you, Mom." The ring box made the smallest sound when I opened it, a sigh of old velvet. Inside was her engagement ring and a drop of dried blood, no bigger than a freckle on the inner lid. I pressed my mouth shut so hard my jaw hurt. The evidence bag held a single object, a cracked disposable phone wrapped in masking tape with a number written in Sharpie. The camcorder tape felt warm, like it remembered hands. The label's date was 4 days before the night she'd left, 25 years ago, when I was 12, and my father told me she ran away because she couldn't handle responsibility. I borrowed the bank's dusty viewing room and an ancient combo TV VCR the manager wheeled in on a squeaky cart, the kind schools retired a decade ago. I locked the door, slid the tape in, and watched the black screen breathe to gray. Snow rattled. Then my mother's face filled the glass, closer than I'd seen it in decades, older than the last memory I had of her, yet unmistakably her. Freckles like spilled cinnamon. Eyes that looked at you like you were a book worth reading. She sat at our old kitchen table, the blue one with the burn mark from the time I tried to make pancakes for her birthday. "Jonathan," she said, and her voice cracked on my name. "If you're watching this, I broke my promise to come home to you, and I don't know how to forgive myself for that. But I also know there's more than one way to leave a house." She drew a breath, forced her hands to still on the tabletop. I could see bruises half hidden under a cuff. "Your father is not the man you think he is. He has a temper, you know that. But he also has debts, and very powerful friends who forgive anything if it protects their profit. I found something in his office I wasn't meant to. I thought it explained why he's been cruel. It explains more than that. There is money he can't account for, and papers that don't belong to him. He wants my signature on transfer forms. He wants me quiet. Yesterday he said, 'People who make noise get a reason to be silent.'" She glanced off camera and swallowed. I'm leaving this tape in a place he doesn't know about. I'm leaving a phone with a number. Call it. Ask for Avery. If I don't make it to the lawyer by Friday, you take this to the police. If the police won't listen, you take it to the press. If the press won't listen, you hold your ground until someone does. The truth is heavy, but it doesn't break. It lands. She reached toward the camera. The image went dark for a heartbeat, then returned. I love you more than anything I ever built. More than the life I thought I wanted. If I don't get to tell you this again, hear it now and every day. None of this is your fault. Not my leaving, not your father's rage. None of it. The picture juddered, a sound like a door opening somewhere in the house. My mother flinched and whispered, "He's home." Then she leaned close, her eyes suddenly fierce, and said, "Jonathan, listen. If anyone tells you I abandoned you, ask them why my ring is in a box with blood." The tape cut to static. I sat in the funeral parlor light of the viewing room as the screen snowed and the VCR whined. For 25 years I'd taught myself not to look too hard at the shape of what I didn't know. I became the man who leaves a room before an argument becomes history, who keeps a spare toothbrush in his desk because sleep at the office is quieter than sleep at home. I told myself survival was a kind of forgiveness. The tape in my lap said otherwise. It said there are truths that wait, patient as a tide, wearing down lies one grain at a time, until a whole seawall falls into the surf. I rewound, paused on her face, then pressed play again to memorize the shape of her mouth when she said my name. When the tape finished a second time, I placed it back in the vault box with the letter, the phone, the ring. I signed the ledger to keep the box in my name. The banker smiled, a polite banker's smile, and said, "Will you be needing anything else today, Mr. Miles?" I said yes, and didn't recognize my own voice. A quiet exit. Outside, February bit through my coat. The sky over downtown looked like wet concrete. I stood under the sandstone cornice of the bank and dialed the Sharpie number on the throwaway phone. It rang twice. A man answered on the inhale. "Avery." "My name is Jonathan Miles," I said. "My mother told me to call this number if she vanished. Her name is Margaret Miles." A beat. A microwave beeped in the background. A radio murmured. When the man spoke again, his voice had moved a register lower. "Where did you get this number?" "From the phone she left in a police evidence bag with a VCR tape and a letter that starts with, 'Don't trust your father.'" The radio clicked off. I heard a door shut, footsteps echoing in tile, the hush of a stairwell. "You're 25 years late," the man said, not cruelly, just like a fact that knew it had been sitting in a chair too long. "Where are you?" "On the steps of Merchants Trust on 4th. "Don't go home. Don't call your father. Don't tell anyone you called this number. Walk to the coffee shop on Alder and 9th. Back table, gray cap. 10 minutes. I looked across the street at the courthouse where my father smiled from a banner last fall beside a quote about civic duty. I walked. I've tried to describe what it's like to carry a secret so big it changes the weight of your bones. It makes your shadow look like someone else's. It makes the city feel unpaved. The bell on the coffee shop door was too cheerful for the day. I took the back table. A man in a gray cap arrived exactly on the 10th minute, sat without asking, and placed a folded napkin on the table. For a second, it looked like an ordinary gesture, and then I saw what the napkin was hiding. A badge, dull with wear, the seal nicked, the number almost rubbed smooth. "Retired," he said, slipping the badge away. I used to feel official. Now I just feel awake. I knew your mother. She came to me with photocopies and a story that smelled like gasoline. I told her to hold on while I built a case. She didn't get the chance. What happened to her? My voice cracked, and whoever heard it might have called it grief. It was fury looking for a door. He studied my face like he was checking if it could hold what he was about to put in it. The official story says she ran. The unofficial story is a rumor with nice shoes. The story I believe has paperwork. Your father's company handled money that didn't belong to him. Your mother found proof. 2 weeks later, she disappeared on a night with rain and a broken security camera. The detective who had the case golfed with your father and closed it as voluntary absence. I tried to reopen it, and my supervisor told me to go coach my son's little league and stop making enemies that donate to politicians. I realized my hands were flat on the table like I'd been searched. She left me a tape. "And a phone," he said. She was smarter than the men who underestimated her. What else was in the box? Her ring, some blood. He exhaled through his teeth and looked at the ceiling like it might have a kinder answer. You need 2 things: a lawyer who doesn't want your father's business, and a safe place to sleep that isn't registered to your name. He'll hear your box was accessed by nightfall. The vault clerk's sister-in-law cleans offices for one of his donors. That's how these cities are built, out of favors and the people who owe them. "Why help me?" I said. "You tried once." He smiled without warmth. "Because ghosts don't forgive the living for giving up. And because I promised your mother that if her son ever called, I'd do what I should have done when she was alive." We left separately, him out the alley door, me through the front where a barista was singing under her breath. Outside, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Call me now. Dad." Instinct, childhood, and 1,000 dinners where silence had been a meal pulled my thumb toward the green button. I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking. When I was 12, my father taught me how to tie a tie like he was teaching me a utility knot that could hold a safe to a riverbed. "Loops," he'd said, fingers quick, breath warm with scotch. "You control the loops, you control the line." That same night, he told me my mother had left because weakness doesn't like to be seen. I spent years imagining that I'd somehow been the mirror she couldn't bear. I imagined being less would make people stay. It took a tape in a basement VCR to understand the trick. Men like my father tie stories just as tight as ties. You control the story. You control the room. I bought a toothbrush and a shirt from a pharmacy and checked into a motel under a name I used in college when I didn't want to be found. Someone I'd been for one summer. A boy who painted houses and learned that sweat makes strangers gentler. The room smelled like lemon and cigarettes crushed under a shoe out of sight of management. I set the ring box on the dresser and the evidence bag beside it, and watched my mother's tape again on an ancient VCR the front desk produced with a shrug. It flickered and warped at the edges like the past trying to crawl out of a photograph. Every story that ever changed me started with a sentence that sounded like a dare. My mother's was simple. If anyone tells you I abandoned you, ask them why my ring is in a box with blood. I wrote the sentence on the motel notepad until the pen dug grooves. Somewhere across town, my father was probably on a call where he said, "Son," like a brand he didn't authorize someone to use. Somewhere, a man in a gray cap was pulling favors out of old drawers. Somewhere in a vault, the lid of a box was lowering like a slow eyelid over a secret that had waited an honest quarter-century. At midnight, the motel's ice machine coughed itself empty, and I couldn't make myself sleep. I dialed Avery. He answered in a whisper. "I've got your lawyer," he said. "She's meaner than guilt and twice as steady. Her name's Mara Chen. Don't say your father's name on unsecured lines." He already texted me. "He will call again," Avery said. "He will ask you to meet somewhere public because public makes predators look civilized. He will offer you money or memory. He will say your mother was unstable. He will say you are. He will say anything except the truth. Do not correct him. Do not go to his house. If you want to hear him, record it. Then let the grown-ups get angry." I laughed once and it came out like a cough. "I'm 37. "Then I guess you're a grown-up," he said. "Get some sleep." I set the motel chair under the door handle like I had when I was 19, and all my fears were mail I didn't have to open yet. I put the ring box on the nightstand. I held the plastic bag with the phone and the dried blood like it could pulse. I waited for the past to knock. It didn't. It sat down on the bed beside me and said, "What took you so long?" At 3:17 a.m., my father finally called. The name on the screen bled light into the dark as if it could announce itself to the wallpaper. I let it ring twice and answered. His voice was warm, practiced, the same tenor he used for donors and funerals. "Johnny, thank God. I've been worried. The bank notified me someone accessed your grandmother's box. Imagine my surprise when they said it was you." "My mother's," I said before I could stop myself. A beat. He adjusted his tie in his mind. "Your mother's, then. I'm glad you're thinking of her. It's been too long. Why don't you come by the house and we'll talk? Breakfast. I'll make pancakes like you used to love." "You burn pancakes," I said. It came out flat and small and 12. He laughed like a man in a commercial. "Well, I can order in." "Jonathan, there's no need to make a mess of old feelings. Whatever you found, if you found anything, it can be explained. People make things look bad when they're tired. You've always had that gentle heart. It makes you easy to mislead." "Did Mom have a gentle heart?" I asked. Silence flowed down the line like oil. When he spoke again, the warmth had cooled a degree. "Your mother made choices that hurt this family. She was unwell. We did what we could." "She called you home on the tape," I said. And in the second I realized I'd said tape, he realized more than I intended. His breath paused. When it returned, it had picked up gravel. "Jonathan, I don't know who is whispering in your ear, but I know who they are, and I know where they eat. Come home, or someone you like will get a visit and remember to be less helpful." I stared at the ceiling seam, the hairline crack like a map of a river I hadn't crossed yet. "I'm meeting a lawyer," I said. "You can talk to her." He laughed properly now, rich and round like he'd just been handed a dessert menu. "Lawyers adore me. Bring her. Breakfast for 3. I ended the call. The room was so quiet I could hear the thermostat remember its job. I texted Avery. "He knows." He wrote back, "Good. Men like him only tell the truth by accident when they think they can buy back the lie." Dawn dragged itself up the edges of the blinds and laid a pale stripe across the ring box. I held my mother's letter again, hearing her voice under every word. There's more than one way to leave a house. My father wanted me to step back through the door and stand where he could erase me again. The tape in my bag said I could choose another door. It said the past was a house too, and some rooms we've never walked through are the ones we were meant to keep. I put on the new shirt, buttoned it slow, and practiced saying my own name like it belonged to me. Then I picked up the ring and slipped it into my pocket where I could feel its weight against my thigh. A small gravity reminding me of the difference between leaving and being taken. I left the motel without looking back. Outside, the city sounded ordinary. Delivery trucks, pigeons, a bus sighing at a corner. But to me, everything had shifted half an inch to the left and revealed the seam. I wasn't going home. I was going after the truth. By the time I reached downtown, the city was just waking up. Truck engines coughing, shopkeepers dragging metal shutters open, the first commuters clutching coffee cups like lifelines. I moved among them invisible, another man with a purpose too fragile to explain. The address Avery had texted me was in the industrial district, a law office that didn't look like one. No brass plate, no receptionist. Just a second-floor door painted gray with a number that looked hand-stenciled. 214B. I knocked once. The door opened halfway, and a woman's voice said, "If you're Jonathan, come in. If you're anyone else, you're lost." Mara Chen looked exactly how a retired cop would describe trouble he respected. Mid-40s, sharp hair, sharper eyes, and an expression that made you check your facts before speaking. She gestured toward a metal chair across a desk, littered with files and 2 half-empty mugs. "You have something your father wants back," she said without preamble. "Avery told me you found evidence. Tell me everything." I placed the ring, the phone, and the letter on the desk. She studied them like artifacts, sliding on latex gloves from a drawer. "Classic intimidation case turned legacy crime," she murmured. "Blood trace, handwriting consistent with stress. And this phone," she peeled back the masking tape, "contains a prepaid SIM never registered. Probably used once, then sealed to hide prints. She powered it on using a burner battery. One unread message blinked on the cracked screen. "You're out of time." Mara frowned. "Timestamp?" 25 years ago, I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Someone scheduled a delayed send, or the network reactivated it when you powered up. Either way, whoever wrote that knew we'd be here." A chill climbed my spine. "He knows already, doesn't he?" "Your father's kind of man doesn't wait to know, he assumes. Which means if he's quiet right now, he's buying something ugly." She looked at me. "Tell me about him." So I did. The speeches about legacy, the donations that bought silence, the way every business meeting ended with someone owing him a favor. I told her how he could turn affection into leverage, how he once said, "Family is just another form of ownership. You maintain it, or you lose equity." When I finished, Mara leaned back. "He's laundering reputation through charity. Common trick. You can hide money offshore, but guilt still leaks through the seams." She slid a file toward me. Inside were surveillance photos. My father shaking hands with a senator, posing at a children's hospital opening, smiling the same perfect, polished smile. These were taken by a journalist who vanished 6 months after asking too many questions. His editor hired me to dig. Then funding dried up. She paused. Look familiar? My stomach turned. Behind my father in one of the photos, half obscured by motion blur, was the same man from my mother's tape. Avery, younger, wearing a badge. So he's been in this longer than I thought, I said. Mara nodded. And he blames himself for not saving her. That's why he's back in the game. I studied the photo until the edges went fuzzy. If this runs as deep as you think, how do we even start? With paper, she said simply. Criminals forget that documents age like bones. We follow signatures, corporate shells, trusts. Somewhere in those layers is a piece of paper your mother refused to sign. That's what he needs destroyed. We worked in silence for hours, tracing corporate filings through public databases, mapping connections between shell companies and campaign donations. By noon, Mara's wall was covered in sticky notes and printed maps of offshore structures. One name kept repeating: Miles Holdings Trust. That's yours, she said quietly. Legally, you're a trustee. I blinked. I've never heard of it. Your mother set it up when you were born. She must have moved part of her inheritance there. He's been using the same entity ever since, thinking no one would check under your name. She turned her laptop toward me. Last transaction, 2 weeks ago. A transfer of $8 million to a subsidiary registered in the Cayman Islands. 2 weeks ago. Before I opened the vault, before the tape, Mara scribbled an address on a card. This is a warehouse on the East Riverfront. It's listed as storage for archival materials belonging to Miles Holdings. I've got a contact in property records who swears it's never paid taxes but still gets security patrols every night. Whatever he's hiding, it's there. She looked up. We go tonight. Quietly. I hesitated. He called me at 3 a.m, threatened to hurt someone I like. Then we move faster, she said. Because the longer we wait, the fewer people you like stay safe. She gathered the evidence into an envelope, sealed it, and placed it in a safe under the desk. If we don't come back, Avery knows where to look. Don't bring your phone, he'll trace it. Buy a burner. And Jonathan, yes? When we walk into that building, you don't look for answers you want. You look for what's real. Sometimes, they're not the same thing. The rest of the day passed like a held breath. I rented another room under another name. At dusk, the city's light turned copper and the air smelled of rain and diesel. I kept seeing my mother's face from the tape. The moment she heard the door open, the whisper of fear she couldn't swallow. At 9, Mara's car pulled up. A black sedan, windows tinted, engine barely audible. She handed me a flashlight and a pair of gloves. No weapons, she said. We're not here to fight. We're here to witness. The warehouse sat between 2 abandoned factories, its sign faded to ghosts of letters. A single floodlight burned over the loading dock, buzzing with insects. We slipped through a side entrance where the padlock was already broken. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old oil. Rows of crates stretched into darkness, each labeled with corporate codes. Mara moved like someone who'd done this before. She found a breaker box and flipped the switch. Fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing a workspace filled with filing cabinets, computers wrapped in plastic, and a table stacked with folders marked confidential. Property of Miles Holdings. She pried one open. Inside were medical records, dozens of them. Employees, she murmured. No. Test subjects. I read a heading. Clinical Trial Phase 2, Project Haven. My father's signature adorned the approval line. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. "Human testing under a shell foundation," Mara said. "He used company funds to finance illegal drug trials. When your mother found out, she didn't just threaten his fortune. She threatened his freedom." She lifted another folder, eyes widening. "And here, see the witness sign off? Margaret Miles." I felt my breath catch. She refused to sign the final clearance. That's what he meant by people who make noise. The lights above us buzzed louder, then dimmed. A motion sensor clicked somewhere in the shadows. Mara froze. "He's got remote surveillance. We've got 10 minutes before his men check the alarm." She pulled out her phone and started photographing the documents. I joined her, scanning every page I could, my hands shaking. Somewhere a distant hum grew, car engines approaching. Mara slipped the phone into her pocket. "That's enough. Out the side door." We ran through the maze of crates. Behind us, the floodlight flared bright, spilling our shadows long across the concrete. Tires screeched outside. Mara whispered, "Don't stop. Keep breathing." We burst into the night just as headlights swung into the alley. She shoved the envelope of photos into my coat. "If they catch me, you run. Get this to Avery. He'll know what to do." "Mara, go!" She pushed me toward the chain-link fence. I climbed, tore my sleeve, dropped on the other side. Behind me, voices shouted. A door slammed. Footsteps thundered. Then a single gunshot cracked the air. I turned once. Mara was gone. The street was empty except for the echo. I ran until my lungs burned, until the sound of the river drowned everything else. When I finally stopped under the bridge, I looked at the envelope trembling in my hands. Inside it was proof that my father's empire was built not just on money, but on blood. The same kind that had dried inside my mother's ring box. The wind off the water smelled of rust and rain. I whispered into the dark. "I found it, Mom. I found what you tried to stop." But the next question rose like a tide I couldn't hold back. Who else had she tried to save? And who had died for it? I looked at the phone, at the single word flashing again. "You're out of time." And I knew the next step wasn't hiding anymore. It was war. The next morning, the city felt different. Like every sound was watching me. I hadn't slept. The envelope from the warehouse sat open on the motel table, pages spread like wounds. Medical reports, payment logs, signatures. All of it proof. And one small note, handwritten in a woman's script I didn't recognize. "We warned her." He didn't listen. The ink had bled, as if written in the rain. I kept hearing the gunshot. Every time I blinked, I saw Mara fall, even though I hadn't seen her body. Maybe that was worse, not knowing if she was alive or one more ghost in my father's ledger. I tried calling Avery, but the burner went straight to static. By noon, news alerts hit my phone. A fire had gutted a warehouse near the East Riverfront. Cause under investigation. The article mentioned no casualties, no witnesses, just smoke and silence. He'd moved fast. I pulled on my jacket, stuffed the evidence into a backpack, and walked to the nearest bus station. My reflection in the dirty window looked like a stranger's. eyes ringed red, jaw tight, hair slicked back by rain. Somewhere beneath all that exhaustion was a thread of purpose pulling me forward. Avery's contact list had included one more number labeled Reporter Safe. I called it from a payphone outside a liquor store. A woman answered with the kind of voice that had been tired for a decade, but still sharp enough to cut glass. "You have 30 seconds before this line burns," she said. "My name is Jonathan Miles. I have proof that Richard Miles is funding illegal medical trials through shell trusts, and that my mother's disappearance 25 years ago wasn't voluntary." The pause on the line felt like a door opening to wind. "Where did you get this number?" "Avery Chen." "Then you have 5 minutes. Meet me at the old Greyhound terminal, Platform 7. Bring nothing you can't lose." She hung up. Platform 7 was empty except for pigeons and graffiti that said, "Justice dies quietly." The reporter was waiting on a bench, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast. She was maybe 40, lean, wired with restless energy. "Name's Keller," she said. "You've got something that scares people with suits." I handed her the folder. She flipped through the pages fast, eyes narrowing. "If this is real, it's not just fraud, it's homicide by proxy. You understand what happens if we print this?" "I'm already living it," I said. Keller smirked without humor. "Good answer. I'll need digital copies and statements, anonymous if you want." Before I could reply, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, froze. "We've been followed." A black sedan had pulled up across the street. 2 men in tailored coats stepped out, scanning the terminal. "Don't look," Keller whispered. "Walk behind me. Exit through the south ramp." We moved, pretending calm. My pulse roared. One of the men lifted his wrist, murmured into a mic. We reached the ramp, but the exit gate was chained. Keller muttered a curse, then darted into a maintenance tunnel half hidden behind a vending machine. The smell of rust and urine burned my nose. "They're not cops," she said between breaths. "Private security, corporate grade. Your father's." "How do you know?" She shot me a look. "I've been chased by them before." We ran through the tunnel, boots splashing in puddles. Voices echoed behind us, closer every second. Keller shoved a side door open, leading to a street 2 blocks down. "Split up," she said. "If they want the documents, I'll buy you time." "I can't just leave you." "You can, and you will." She pressed a flash drive into my palm. "Backup of everything. Hide it. Publish it if I disappear. Go." She bolted toward the crowd. I ran the other way. Behind me, tires screeched. Someone shouted my name. My father's voice, amplified by memory more than distance. I ducked into an alley, heart hammering, pressed my back to the wall. The sedan rolled past the mouth of the alley, slow like a shark's fin. I waited until the sound faded, then slipped out toward the subway. Inside the train car, I finally breathed. The flash drive in my hand felt heavier than any weapon. On the screen opposite me, someone had left a newspaper. Front page headline: "Mara Chen missing after industrial fire." Her photo looked like a ghost mid-sentence. I closed my eyes and swore silently. When I got off at 33rd Street, rain was falling again. I walked until I saw a church with its doors open. Inside, the air smelled of wax and damp stone. I sat in the back pew, the flash drive still in my palm, and let the quiet wrap around me. I hadn't prayed in years. Not since the night my father told me she'd left, and I begged whatever God was listening to bring her back. But sitting there, I whispered her name anyway. "Mom, if you can hear me, I know now." I'll finish what you started. A voice behind me said, "You're late." I turned. Avery stood in the doorway, coat soaked, eyes bloodshot but alive. Relief hit me like a punch. "You're not dead." "Not yet," he said, sliding into the pew beside me. "But someone's making a strong case for it." I showed him the flash drive. "The warehouse burned. Mara's gone. Keller has the files, but it's only a matter of time before he finds her." Avery nodded slowly. "He's tightening the circle. He'll want to control the narrative before it hits the press, which means he's planning a public statement, probably some charity gala or award event. He'll spin it like he's the victim of extortion. Then we crash his show." Avery looked at me for a long time. "You sound like her." "Good," I said. He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "All right. The Miles Foundation hosts its annual fundraiser this weekend. Press, politicians, cameras. If you want confrontation, that's your stage. But you won't get a second chance. He'll have security and lawyers. You need to corner him with proof he can't deny." I held up the flash drive. "This enough?" "Maybe, but evidence means nothing without a witness. And you, Jonathan, are the last person who saw Margaret Miles alive, even if it was on tape." The word alive hit like thunder. We planned through the night, hunched over a map of the event hall Avery had stolen from a fire marshal's database. He'd aged a decade in those hours, coughing, rubbing his eyes, the fatigue of a man who'd been running too long. At dawn, he pushed back his chair. "You confront him on stage. Say nothing he can twist. Show the footage if we get the chance. Keller will stream it. I'll handle security feeds. You just tell the truth." "And if the truth gets me killed?" He smiled grimly. "Then at least it'll be televised." The day of the gala arrived clear and cold. The building glittered like a cathedral of glass. Banners read, "Miles Foundation, Innovation for Humanity." Cameras flashed as politicians shook my father's hand, the same hand that had signed my mother's death warrant. I entered through the service corridor, wearing a catering jacket Avery had procured. In my pocket, the flash drive waited like a loaded chamber. From the ballroom came applause, my father stepping to the podium. His voice carried, calm and honeyed. "Tonight, we honor those who push the boundaries of compassion through science." I slipped closer, weaving among servers until I stood at the curtain's edge. The projection screen behind him displayed a slideshow of his charitable projects. Smiling children, clean laboratories, the illusion of benevolence. Avery's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Stage left clear, now or never." I stepped out. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. The cameras turned toward me, confusion rippling through the crowd. My father's smile faltered, but didn't break. "Jonathan," he said smoothly, microphone catching his tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, my son has decided to join us. Unexpected, but welcome. Family is, after all, the foundation of legacy." I walked up beside him, the lights blinding. "Legacy," I said. "That's what you call it when you bury the truth deep enough?" A murmur swept the room. He kept his composure. "Son, perhaps we should." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. This contains every document you burned, every life you bought, every signature you forged, including Mom's. He reached for my shoulder, a gesture meant to look paternal. Jonathan, you're confused. These people don't need drama. She's not dead, I said. The words fell like glass, shattering. She was never gone. You made her disappear. Gasps, shutter clicks. Somewhere, a reporter shouted a question. My father's jaw tightened. Enough, he hissed under his breath, still smiling for the cameras. Walk away now, and I'll let you live long enough to regret it. I met his eyes. You can't threaten me with silence anymore. You taught me how to tell stories, remember? Tonight, I'm telling yours. I turned toward the audience, raised the flash drive high. Everyone here deserves to know where their donations really went. Project Haven wasn't research. It was human experimentation. And the whistleblower who tried to stop it was my mother, Margaret Miles. Security moved in. Reporters surged. My father's voice cracked through the noise, sharp as a whip. Jonathan! But before he could finish, Avery cut the house lights. The screens behind us flickered, my mother's face appearing, grainy but alive from the tape. If you're watching this, your father has already told you a story about me. It's the wrong one. The crowd gasped. Flashbulbs burst like lightning. My father lunged toward the podium, yanking the cord, but it was too late. The footage streamed to every press feed Keller had prepared. In that frozen second, he looked at me, not as a father, not as a man, but as an animal cornered by its own blood. He whispered, "You think you've won? You don't even know what she did." Then he shoved past me and fled off stage. Security chaos erupted. Reporters shouted. Avery's voice in my ear, "Get out, now!" I slipped through the backstage corridor as alarms started ringing. Not fire alarms, but the sound of panic unraveling a dynasty. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. Police sirens wailed in the distance. I didn't know if they were coming for him or from me. Maybe both. I leaned against the wall trembling, watching the headlines being born in real time on glowing phone screens. My father's empire cracked open under spotlights. But one question burned hotter than triumph. If she wasn't dead, where was she? And somewhere deep in me, a voice, hers, whispered, "There's more than one way to leave a house." I realized then that my mother might still be alive, and the only way to prove it was to follow the trail she'd left unfinished. So I called Avery. "We're not done," I said. "We're just getting close." By the time the police arrived, the gala had turned into a battlefield of flashbulbs and shattered glass. They pulled my father out in handcuffs an hour later, face pale but composed, his lawyer shouting about doctored footage. I watched from across the street, hood up, hands deep in my pockets, as cameras swarmed him like locusts. For once, he had no script. The headlines wrote themselves by morning. Philanthropist exposed in human trial scandal. Subhead. Family drama erupts during charity gala. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Avery was gone again, unreachable. Keller had gone underground after publishing the footage. Mara was still listed as missing. The city hummed like nothing had changed, yet everything in me had. At noon, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a single message. You're not finished. Meet me at Pier 17, noon. Come alone. I almost deleted it. Another trap, another voice trying to steer me. But something in the wording, calm, direct, almost maternal, made my pulse quicken. The pier was empty except for gulls and the sound of ropes slapping against wet hulls. The air smelled of salt and iron. A small ferry rocked against the dock, its engine idling. A woman in a long coat stood at the rail back to me. For a second I thought my mind was playing the same cruel trick it had for years. But then she turned. It was her. Not the fragile face from the tape, not the ghost in my memory, but my mother, alive, older, lined with time, eyes fierce and bright. I couldn't speak. My throat closed around every word I'd saved for 25 years. "Hello, Jonathan," she said softly. "You look like him when you're angry, but your eyes, they're still mine." I stepped forward, every nerve electric. "You're alive." She nodded once. Barely, but yes. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, but my body stayed still, frozen between disbelief and grief. "You let me think you were dead." "I had to." "You had to?" My voice broke. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? I buried you in my mind 1,000 times." She flinched but didn't look away, and if I'd stayed, he would have buried you for real. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the memory of a mother who hummed while washing dishes. "All this time, where were you?" She leaned on the rail, watching the gray waves. "After that night, Avery got me out. We staged the blood, the disappearance. I thought I'd resurface in a few months when the investigation started, but your father shut everything down. The detectives were his friends, the media on his payroll. Avery told me to wait, that the only way to beat him was to make him forget I existed." "You let him raise me alone," I said quietly. Her shoulders trembled. "If I'd tried to take you, he would have killed us both. I chose survival over motherhood, and I've hated myself for it every day since." The wind whipped her hair across her face and she brushed it aside, that same old gesture, muscle memory from another life. "When you found the tape, I knew you were ready." "How did you know I'd ever find it?" "I didn't," she said. "But hope is the last rebellion we have." We stood in silence. The ferry rocked softly. Somewhere, a horn blared in the distance, echoing through fog. Then she said, "He's not done." I frowned. "He's in custody." "For now," she said. "But he has leverage, documents hidden across multiple fronts. The experiments you exposed, they're just one branch. He worked with people who don't forgive exposure. When his empire falls, they fall too. They'll come for you, for Avery, for me." She pulled a small drive from her pocket, identical to mine. "This is the rest. Everything we couldn't touch then. Names, accounts, the entire network. If you finish what I started, you can destroy them all." I took the drive, the metal warm from her hand. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one he can't buy," she said. "And because the world believes I'm dead. You can move where I can't." She smiled faintly. "I watched your speech. You did what I couldn't. You spoke. I didn't do it for glory. I know. You did it for truth. That's why you're dangerous." I exhaled, shaking my head. What do I do with this? Take it to Keller. She'll know how to leak it safely. She's in hiding. Then find her. And when it's over, come back here. There's something else you need to see. What? But she was already stepping toward the ferry's door. When you're ready, she said. Not before. Mom. She paused. You always called me that when you were scared. I am scared. Her eyes softened. Good. Courage without fear is just vanity. The engine roared, and the ferry began to pull away. I stood on the pier, clutching the drive, watching her fade into the fog like a chapter closing itself. When she vanished, I finally whispered the words that had been buried inside me since I was 12. I missed you. The wind carried nothing back. That night I opened the drive in a safe house Avery had arranged. Inside were hundreds of files, memos, contracts, offshore transfers, all tracing a web larger than anything I'd imagined. It wasn't just my father. It was senators, CEOs, research institutes, all tied through Project Haven. The final folder was labeled Continuance Protocol. Inside, blueprints for a new lab dated last month. Location, Nevada. Status, active. I stared at the word active until it stopped meaning anything. My father might be behind bars, but his creation was still breathing. The drive contained one more video file, time-stamped 6 weeks ago. I pressed play. My mother appeared again, filmed in a dim hotel room, face thinner but determined. If you're seeing this, she began, then you've found me, and you know the truth isn't over. The people behind Haven won't stop until they rebuild under another name. You can't fight them through law. They own law. You fight them through exposure, floodlight, not fire. The truth must be public and permanent. She leaned closer to the camera. I'm going after the ones still running the trials. But I can't do it alone. Avery will protect you until I can't anymore. If you never hear from me again, don't mourn me twice. Finish it. The recording ended, leaving the faint sound of her breathing fading into static. I sat there for a long time, staring at the frozen screen, until my reflection stared back. The next morning, the news reported that my father had been transferred to a federal holding facility for safety. It sounded clean, bureaucratic, but Avery called to tell me the truth. He's being moved because someone wants him gone before he talks, Avery said. He's leverage, a living liability. And Mom? She's still in motion. She has contacts feeding her from inside the network. She won't stop until they're done. She asked me to finish it. Avery's voice softened. Then you better start thinking like her. I watched the sunrise bleed over the skyline. The city looked the same, but I wasn't. I wasn't the son of Richard Miles anymore. I was the heir to Margaret Miles's unfinished war. I turned the flash drive in my hand, the light catching its metal surface like a blade. If the empire that killed her soul was still alive, then so was her purpose, and I would see it through. The world had heard the story of a corrupt father. Now it would learn the story of a mother who refused to stay dead. The truth wasn't over. It was just changing hands. By the time the world decided to believe me, it was already starting to forget me. The first wave of headlines burned fast and bright. Billionaire arrested. Son exposes father's crimes. Family betrayal at charity gala. But within weeks, the noise dimmed. News cycles moved on. The story became another scandal among many. That's how power survives. Not by silencing you, but by outlasting your voice. Keller's articles vanished from the front pages. Then she did too. Her apartment was cleared out, her name scrubbed from the newsroom's roster. The official story said she'd taken a personal leave. Avery called it what it was: erasure. She hit too close, he said, lighting a cigarette outside the safe house. They're cleaning the board. I stared at the city lights flickering beyond the window. So what now? We go louder. Leak everything. Make it impossible to bury. He handed me a list of encrypted accounts: journalists, human rights groups, independent media. Send the files to all of them at once, but wait until I give the word. They'll try to trace it. If we mistime it, they'll shut it down before it spreads. I nodded, pocketing the drive. That night, I dreamed of my mother walking down a hospital corridor, turning every time I blinked until I couldn't tell if she was leading me or running from me. When I woke, the power was out and the window was open. Someone had been inside. The flash drive was gone. I froze, scanning the room. No signs of forced entry. Just a faint scent of cologne I hadn't smelled in years. My father's. It couldn't be him. He was in federal custody. Unless he wasn't. I called Avery, but the line went dead halfway through the first ring. I tried again, nothing. Then the television flickered on by itself, static, then a video feed. My father, sitting in what looked like a hotel room, dressed in the same tailored suit he'd worn at the gala. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Jonathan," he said, "if you're watching this, it means you've finally learned what it costs to play hero. I'm not your villain, son. I'm your inheritance. And you've just bankrupted yourself trying to destroy it." I stepped closer, my pulse pounding. "You think you're exposing corruption? You're feeding it," he continued. "Every name you release belongs to someone with sharper teeth than me. You'll die before you finish the list. And your mother, well, she's already where she belongs, hiding behind ghosts." The screen went black. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "She's next." Attached, a photo of my mother at Pier 17, taken that morning. I grabbed my jacket and ran. The streets blurred as I drove, rain slashing the windshield, sirens wailing somewhere behind me. When I reached the pier, the ferry was still there, but empty. On the dock, a single envelope rested under a stone. Inside, a handwritten note. "They found me. Do not come. Finish it your way. Love, Mom." I stood there, soaked to the bone, reading it again and again until the ink bled into the paper. She was alive hours ago. Now she was gone again. And this time, maybe for real. Behind me, a car door slammed. "Jonathan!" Avery. He looked 10 years older than yesterday. "They hit 3 safe houses. My contact in the bureau says your father's transfer never arrived. Someone intercepted the convoy." "He's free." Avery nodded grimly. "Or someone wants us to think he is. Either way, the hunt's on." I looked back at the water. "He's coming for her. We need to move first." Avery rubbed his temples. "There's one place he'd go, the research compound in Nevada. If the continuance protocol is active, that's where he'll resurface. But Jonathan, that's not just a facility, it's a fortress. Private army, desert for miles. You can't walk in there." "I'm not walking," I said. I'm breaking the door." He gave me a long look, then sighed. "You really are your mother's son." We drove through the night, switching cars twice, using old roads that didn't exist on GPS anymore. Avery briefed me on the plan. Infiltration at dawn, extraction by noon, evidence upload through an off-grid satellite once we were clear. "You sure about this?" he asked as the horizon bled orange. "If he's alive, he won't go quietly." "I'm not here for quiet," I said. "I'm here for truth." By midday, the desert stretched endless before us, the compound a smear of metal and glass on the horizon. Security towers glinted under the sun. Avery parked the Jeep behind a dune and handed me a headset. "We go in through the maintenance tunnel. Cameras looped for 6 minutes. Stay close." We moved fast, shadows in the heat. The tunnel opened into a corridor humming with electricity. Somewhere above, machines whirred, the sound of science without conscience. We reached a lab door marked Haven 2, Continuance Division. Inside, rows of glass chambers lined the walls, some empty, others holding shadowed figures under suspended lights. My stomach twisted. Avery whispered, "My God, they restarted it." On the central console, a single monitor blinked. "Access granted. Dr. R. Miles." My father's signature, recent. I scanned the room, then froze. Behind the glass, one of the chambers wasn't empty. A woman sat upright inside, tubes attached to her arms, eyes closed. It was her, my mother. I ran to the console. "Avery," pounding it. "Mom, it's me." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, then locked on mine. She mouthed something I couldn't hear. Avery hit the control panel. "The seal's coded. I need time." "Do it!" The air vibrated with alarms. Red lights pulsed. Doors slammed shut across the corridor. Then a voice echoed from the speakers, calm, deep, unmistakable. "Son," my father said, "you never learned when to stop." He stepped into view on the upper balcony, surrounded by guards. His face was half shadow, half smirk. "I told you," he continued, "the truth isn't justice. It's leverage. And you've just walked into mine." Avery drew his gun, but before he could aim, a shot rang out. He fell hard, clutching his shoulder. I grabbed him, dragged him behind a console. "Stay with me." He grimaced. "Get her out. I'll cover you." I looked up at my father. "You used her. You kept her alive as proof?" He smiled faintly. "As insurance. She knows where the rest is. You could have inherited an empire, Jonathan. Instead, you chose a crusade. And crusaders die poor." I smashed the control panel with a wrench. Sparks flew, glass hissed. The chamber seal released with a hiss of pressure. My mother stumbled forward into my arms, weak but breathing. "Go," Avery rasped, firing at the guards. "Now!" We ran through the tunnel as alarms wailed. Behind us, explosions cracked. Avery's doing. The desert wind hit us like fire as we emerged into daylight. My mother leaned on me, gasping. "He won't stop." "Then neither will I." We reached the Jeep. I started the engine just as the compound erupted behind us, flames curling into the sky. As we sped away, she whispered, "You look like him when you're angry." I glanced at her. "Then I'll learn to look like you." The desert swallowed the horizon, the fire shrinking to a speck. For the first time in 25 years, we were free together. But freedom felt like a countdown. Because somewhere behind us, even if the fire took him, I knew he wasn't done. Men like Richard Miles don't die in explosions. They die in courtrooms, in headlines, in legacies, or not at all. And I intended to make sure this time he did. The desert burned behind us like the end of a world. The compound was gone, swallowed by its own sins. But as the smoke rose higher, I knew better than to trust fire to finish the job. My father had built his life on surviving disasters, financial, political, moral. He wouldn't let a little explosion make him mortal. We drove until dusk. The sky bruised purple over the horizon, and the air tasted of sand and gasoline. My mother slept fitfully beside me, murmuring fragments of memories I couldn't catch. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lines time had carved. 25 years of exile, of silence, of carrying a secret too heavy for one heart. When night fell, we stopped at a roadside diner on the edge of nowhere. Neon lights flickered, spelling out "open" like a question. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and fried onions filled the air. I helped her into a booth, ordered water, and tried to act normal, whatever that meant for people who had just escaped a nightmare. She watched me quietly. "You look tired," she said. "I've been worse." "You've been alone," she corrected. "That's worse." I didn't argue. She took a sip of water and whispered, "He won't give up, Jonathan. He never did." "Then we finish this," I said. "Not just him, the network, the people who funded Haven." Her eyes glistened. "It never ends, you know. You cut off one head, another grows. But maybe if enough people see the truth, it weakens." Before I could reply, a waitress approached. Tall, thin, tired smile. She set down the check without us asking. "Guy in the corner covered your bill," she said. I looked over. A man in a leather jacket sat in the back, head down, reading a newspaper. When he noticed me watching, he folded the paper and stood up. "Jonathan Miles," he said. The voice was deep, familiar. It was him. Richard Miles looked older, dust and blood on his cuffs, a small bandage above his brow. But his posture hadn't changed. He still carried himself like a man who owned every room he entered. The diner went silent. Even the radio seemed to stop mid-song. My mother's hand trembled around her glass. "Richard," she whispered. He smiled, thin and cruel. "Margaret, you look almost alive." I stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "You should be dead." He shrugged. "You've said that before." The waitress froze, unsure whether to intervene. He waved her off with practiced charm. "Family dispute. Happens to the best of us." "Sit down," I said. He did, right across from me. "You burned my lab. Cost me decades. But congratulations, son. You've finally become something I respect." "A threat?" He grinned. "A mirror." He reached into his coat. Instinct made me tense, but he only pulled out a small flash drive and set it on the table. "You missed one. This is everything. The rest of Haven. The politicians, the accounts. You think you can handle that weight? I didn't move. Why give it to me? Because I'm tired, he said simply, and because the people above me are tired of me. They've decided I'm expendable. So I have a choice. Let them erase me quietly, or let my own son finish the job with an audience. He leaned closer, eyes gleaming. Tell me, Jonathan, when you destroy me, will you do it for justice or for revenge? My mother's voice cut through the tension. He'll do it for truth, something you never understood. Richard turned to her, his expression softening for the first time. You still believe truth changes anything? Look around. The world doesn't want truth, Margaret. It wants entertainment. Your son's little show at the gala proved that. Maybe, she said, but sometimes entertainment becomes history. He chuckled. You always had a poet's heart. That's why you lost. She looked at him calmly. No, that's why I'm still here. For a moment, silence hung between them. 25 years of love turned war. Then my father slid the flash drive toward me. Take it. Finish your crusade. But understand this. If you release what's on there, you won't be saving anyone. You'll just be detonating the next bomb. These people don't vanish. They adapt. You'll spend your life running. I looked at him, at the man who'd built empires out of lies. Then I'll run faster. His jaw tightened. You sound just like her. Good. He leaned back, weary, almost human. Then let's end it, once and for all. In one swift motion, he pulled a gun from under his jacket and aimed it, not at me, but at her. Richard, no! I shouted, lunging across the table. The shot cracked through the diner like thunder. The glass behind her shattered. For a split second, I didn't know who was bleeding. Then she gasped, clutching her side. I tackled him to the ground. The gun skidded under a booth. He swung wildly, his fist connecting with my jaw, but I didn't stop. Years of rage, grief, and unanswered questions poured out in every blow. You killed everything you touched, I shouted. He laughed through blood. And you'll kill me to prove you're better. I froze, fist raised. The truth hit me harder than any punch. He wanted this. To die by my hand, to make me his reflection. Behind us, my mother's voice came weak but clear. Jonathan, don't. I looked at her, pale, trembling, but alive. He doesn't deserve mercy. No, she whispered. But you do. I dropped the gun. It clattered to the floor. My father lay there panting, smirking even as blood dripped from his lip. You'll regret that. Maybe, I said. But I'll regret being you more. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. I knelt beside my mother, pressing my jacket against the wound. She smiled faintly, her hand finding mine. You did it, she whispered. You ended it. I shook my head. Not yet. I picked up the flash drive still lying on the table. This is what ends it. She squeezed my hand. Then finish it. When the police burst in, my father didn't resist. He looked almost peaceful, like a man watching his own funeral in advance. As they dragged him out, he turned to me one last time. Legacy, he said softly. That's all that matters. I met his gaze. Then mine starts where yours ends. He smiled, and for the first time, I saw fear behind it. They took him away. The paramedics lifted my mother onto a stretcher. I followed them outside. The dawn was breaking, pale and slow, painting the sky with the color of beginnings. As the ambulance doors closed, she reached out weakly, her voice fading. "Remember what I said, Jonathan. Truth doesn't need to win. It just needs to survive." The doors shut, and the siren wailed into the sunrise. I stood there, holding the flash drive, feeling the weight of every secret it carried. Behind me, the diner's neon sign sputtered one last time before dying completely. In that silence, I realized what she meant. Truth was never about victory. It was about endurance. About lighting a match in the dark and keeping it alive, even when the wind howls. I turned toward the road, the sun warming my face, and started walking. Because the world needed to see what was inside this drive, even if it killed me. They kept my father in federal custody this time. Not in a suit, not behind lawyers, but in a plain gray cell with no windows. The government called it protective detention, but everyone knew it meant something else. Containment. His empire had collapsed. His partners, the politicians and investors who once toasted to his brilliance, were now under investigation. The headlines read like obituaries for the powerful. Project Haven scandal expands. Corporate empire in ruins. But his name, Richard Miles, still carried weight. Even destroyed, he was a gravitational force. My mother recovered slowly in a private hospital under a false name. I stayed with her for weeks, reading every message that poured in after I leaked the final files. The night I uploaded them, the internet broke for 24 hours. Thousands of documents went live on mirrored servers. Proof of human trials, corruption, shell companies, political bribery. People called me a hero. Some called me a liar. Most just called me a headline. I didn't care. The truth was out. I spent my days watching over her, my nights walking the city. Portland looked smaller now, stripped of the illusions I'd grown up believing. But it was real. And maybe that was enough. One morning she woke to the sound of birds outside the window and whispered, "You kept your promise." "I kept yours," I said. She smiled faintly. "We're the same thing now, Jonathan. Survivors of the same lie." A week later, I got a call from Avery. His voice was tired, but lighter. "It's done," he said. "The hearings start next month. Keller resurfaced, safe, hidden. She's going to testify. The world's watching." "And him?" I asked. "He's quiet. But men like him never stay quiet forever." "Then we'll be ready," I said. He paused. "You know, your mother once told me something I didn't understand until now. That justice isn't the opposite of love. It's the last form of it." When he hung up, I sat in the hospital garden, watching the wind move through the daisies my mother loved so much. She'd started painting again. Quiet, patient strokes, the way she used to before everything went wrong. Each canvas looked like forgiveness in progress. She'd begun a new one that morning, a small house by the river, sunlight catching on its windows, 2 figures standing in the garden, one taller, one small. You could tell it was us. I don't know what happens next, I said softly. You live, she said simply. You let the world see that truth doesn't just expose. It heals. A month later, she moved back to the Oregon coast, to the same house she once dreamed of in her paintings. The town didn't know her story. They just knew her as a quiet woman who painted sunsets and gave free lessons to children. I visited every weekend. Nathan, my son, ran through her garden laughing, chasing butterflies between the daisies. My wife, Audrey, sat on the porch talking with her, their laughter carrying through the wind. Sometimes I'd stand by the fence and look toward the sea, where the horizon met the sky in that endless line. The place where everything disappeared, but nothing was truly gone. One evening, the sunset burned gold over the water. My mother called out from the porch, "Jonathan, come see this light. It's perfect." I walked up, smiling. "You sound like you did when I was 10. She laughed quietly. That's how I know I've finally come home. We stood there together, the air thick with salt and peace, as if the world had finally exhaled. Later, after she went to bed, I sat at her old desk and opened a notebook she'd left for me. Inside, on the first page, was a single line written in her delicate script. Truth is not a sword, my son. It's a seed. You plant it and walk away. One day it grows where you least expect. I closed the book and looked out at the stars. In the distance, a car's headlights disappeared down the road. Avery, keeping watch like a ghost who refused to rest. I thought about my father, sitting in his cell somewhere, maybe replaying the same tape I once did, wondering how it all turned to dust. I thought about how easily power burns, and how stubbornly truth survives. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel haunted. I felt free. The world was still broken, the system still corrupt. But somewhere, a boy was planting daisies with his grandmother, and that was enough proof that something good had survived the fire. The night was calm. The sea whispered against the shore. And as the wind carried the scent of salt and paint, I whispered the only words that mattered anymore. I found you, Mom. And this time, I won't lose you again.